Hi, everybody. My name's Toni and Marcolini. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. So, I have a very exciting guest with me today, Geoffrey Mark. Welcome, Geoffrey.
My pleasure.
So, you have such a rich history in what I consider to be just absolute Hollywood royalty. Um, and your books, obviously, kind of chronicle, many of your experiences. But I thought how interesting it would be to have, like, to run through your brain, in light of the fact that you've had these experiences. So let's talk a little bit about the Lucy book.
My IQ is 163. Be careful where you walk, but you're welcome to walk around.
Just poke through, knock on a few doors.
Yeah, hey, I am literally an open book.
I mean, you're one of the few books that are published with the consent of the Arnaz family.
Yes.
The support, certainly, of the Arnaz family. A lot of our things that are out there are more like unauthorized. And for the fans of I Love Lucy, the show, or the comedian slash actress, your book is the absolute go-to, right, of anybody who wants any information, certainly about her career or the show.
I'm
So
very grateful. Yeah.
can you tell me a little bit about like your experience with her?
Well, golly, that wasn't the question I was expecting. Uh, First of all, I'm very grateful that Lucy fans feel that the Lucy book, which is the name of the book, is like the Bible for Lucille Ball's television career. So the book starts in live television before I Love Lucy and takes you through literally every single time she was on television. I Love Lucy, The Lucy Show, Here's Lucy, Life with Lucy, The Carol Burnett Show, Make Room for Daddy, game shows, Password, talk shows, Johnny Carson, Merv Griffin, because as you said, there were a lot of books published. And they were published about Miss Ball's personal life, her the quote unquote thing, her stormy marriage to Mr. Arnaz, her heartbreaks, quote unquote, with her children. And I must tell you up front, I know most of these authors. We live in the same neighborhood, so to speak. But, and no offense to anyone who's written anything about her, the books didn't explain the work. The books were not necessarily 100% truthful, or they would take something that's this important and make it this important because it would sell books. And I didn't
Well,
want to
that's
do
one of the things I liked about your book. I liked the concept that you focused on the creativity, right? I focus on creativity on the podcast. And when you have somebody who created such a healthy body of work, who was sort of legendary in her field, I think, yeah, why aren't we focusing on her creativity in doing that? And I think that your book really did that.
I thank you. That's how I felt about it. Look, you and I are sitting here talking about Lucille Ball, not because of who she slept with before she met Desi, or the fight she had with somebody, or how someone didn't like working with her. That's not why we're talking about her. We're talking about her because her work was excellent.
Mm.
Lucille Ball was the very best at what she does and did. And
Agreed.
that's a good reason to celebrate her. See, that all of the books I've written are about people who are the very best at what they do.
Yeah.
And one cookbook. Um, but that's my whole career. I got started at 15 in show business, and I've always done my best to surround myself with people who are excellent, with people who work hard and use their talents and to learn from. It's a template. It's a college education, And as you know, I'm not just an author, I'm also a performer and, jazz singer and a comedian. And I did a lot of shows on the stage in New York and a producer and director and writer for television. I've turned down so much work because I thought it was crap. And yeah, I could have made a whole lot more money had I just done the crap and taken the money. I won't do it. And the Arnaz family know this. I have been offered $500,000 to spill my guts about what I know about everybody and everything. And it's like, yeah, I know probably more about that family than anyone other than the family themselves. I will never ever write that story. I will never. Why? Lucy Arnaz,
What's the
Desi
point?
Arnaz Jr., Larry Luckenbill, Lucy's husband, their children have been so good to me. And Miss Ball was so kind to me. Why would I want to in any way harm them to make a buck? I just
Do you
won't.
remember the first time you met her?
Yes, it was in the middle 1980s. Lucille Ball had come to New York where I was living at the time because I come from Brooklyn originally.
Me too.
I know, I know. We're both originally 718 people. In fact, it was 212 when I was born. There was no 718. Um, had come to New York because Bill Paley, who was the owner pretty much of CBS, had started something. It's now called the Paley Center. Then it was brand new. No one had ever thought of opening up the doors to a place where people could come and look at wonderful, rare, classic television performances. And I was one of the original members of this. And Miss Ball was coming to town to do a symposium. And because I was one of the original members, I got first crack at tickets, took a buddy with me, and it was almost surreal to sit in this room with, I don't know, 250 people maybe. And it was like people couldn't breathe. They were so excited to actually be with her. We'd spent all of us, our childhoods, watching all of her shows, all of her different series. In New York City, good heavens, you could see I Love Lucy and the Lucy Show and Here's Lucy every single day, 7 days a week. And she came out, and my first impression was this is the closest to Lucy Ricardo I've seen her look in a long time because she was wearing her own hair, not a wig, and she was not wearing television makeup. She was wearing heavy street makeup. And she was casually dressed. She looked beautiful. And the next thing I noticed, because all she did was take questions and answers from the audience. She didn't have a show, so to speak. But the inane questions people were asking her, next to Ricky and Fred and Ethel, did you like Mrs. Trumbull the best? And I was thinking to myself, you're having this opportunity to talk to a legend, a genius, and that's what you want to know? So you rose your hand and she'd pick. And Gary Morton, her husband, was sitting on the edge of the stage, helping her, see through the lights. And she said, that man with the red beard. And Gary said, Lucy, there's nobody out there with a red beard. And they handed me the microphone, and I said, well, there's not much left on top, but the beard is full and red. And she went, ah ha 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 ha, that I made her laugh. It was like, all right, I've already had enough, but I wasn't going to let go. So I said to her, Miss Ball, your good friend Jack Benny, and that got her attention, said the reason people watch sitcoms is because the characters do shtick. They do repeated pieces of business that audiences look for. And I said to her, you have several of them, but you've stopped doing two of them. Could you please tell me why you've stopped doing the crying jag? And a word that's in the scripts of I Love Lucy and a couple of episodes of a Lucy show called spider in big black bold letters. The spider was a word to tell her to go, "Ugh." And I said, "You stopped doing both of those things. Why?" And she looked at me like, "Who are you?" And she said, "Young man, that is the best question anyone has ever asked me about my comedy." And for the next 20 minutes, she allowed me to ask question after question. Thankfully, the buddy I brought along with me had been in the Navy, had been a secretary in the Navy, and knew how to take shorthand. And he wrote down every word she said. And that was the beginning of the Lucy book.
Wow.
And and
That's
and then again, this is now not professional Geoffrey Mark. This is fanboy Jeff talking. She said, "You have to give up the microphone. We have to let other people talk." I said, I'm fine. Yes, I'd be happy to." She said, "You've still got the microphone in your hand." I said, "Yeah, that's right." She goes, "All right, this is just for you. Now sit down."
Oh, I love that.
How can you not love the generosity of spirit? And I have found that with her children, and uh, they made the book happen because I promised to write a book about the work. And
Yeah.
that's why they authorized it. Desi Jr., the first time I met him, we spent about 10 hours together. And I kept saying, "Desi, don't you want me to go?" "No, no, no. You're doing great work here. Let's get it all done." Now, it turned into months of talking. But at the end of the first day, he, gets up from the couch and shakes my hand. And he said, "This is the deal. If the book you're writing actually reflects the questions you're asking me, I'm going to give you the approval to say authorized by right on the cover. However, if you are writing another book about my supposedly drunken father and my supposedly mean mother, I will find you and castrate you." Only he didn't say castrate. He said something else I won't repeat. And we shook hands, and uh, their generosity is amazing. Their support is amazing, both for my professional career and in my personal life. Whenever I hit a huge bump in my personal life, one or the other of them has just the right thing to say to me. When
Mm.
my partner died 6 years ago, Lucy and I were at a function for wonderful Carol Cook. And she came over and gave me a hug. And she said, "Well, how are you handling all of this?" And I said to her, "I'm a mess." She said, "Jeff, it's like a book. Your life is your book. You can choose to spend the rest of your life mourning for him, or you can choose to spend the rest of your life celebrating him. Make a good choice."
Yeah.
Thank God that the Arnaz family is in my life. Uh, I don't claim to be their best friends. I claim to be the recipient of their amazing generosity and support.
So before I want to try to hit your other books too, but I have to know, like in your experience, because you've studied it certainly more at length than the average person. Creatively, what is the best piece of work you think Lucille Ball ever did?
Uh,
Creatively.
no, Miss Ball and I are in agreement on this one. Not the whole episode, but that moment, that 5 or 10 minute scene where she's doing vitamin to vegemin, I
Yeah.
think is the best creative work she's ever done. You have to understand
Was
that
that ad-libbed? I think some of
no,
that? No.
no, 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 no. Also, no. And I'm saying it that way because people have written books, pardon me, saying that, "Oh, what a genius she is. She's a clown." Well, yeah, she can clown around, but she's an actress, and she's an amazing actress. Her original writers understood that Lucille Ball didn't just, create out of the air. It had to be on paper. So her scripts, and I've seen the script to Vitamin Vegemin, Lucy lifts up a spoon, Lucy pours some liquid, Lucy cocks her head, Lucy opens her eyes, Lucy smells it, Lucy, they give her all the stuff. It's all written out for her. Now, the genius of Lucille Ball is to take all of that in 4 days from first reading to performing in front of a live audience. And then she makes what they wrote better and funnier. That's her genius. The script has to be there, and then she jumps. In the case of Vitamin Vegemin, she did not ad lib anything, but she did lose her place in the script and had to repeat something to get where she needed to be. Now, no one noticed it except the director, but and I've noticed it because I've had the script in my hands and I can see, oh, she's deviating a little bit. But it wasn't, I'll give you a good example of what I mean. On Here's Lucy, her third series, different writers. And her name was Lucy Carter, for those of you who don't remember Here's Lucy. Interior of Carter living room. There is a fish tank with piranhas. There are roller skates. There are stilts. There are paper airplanes and glue, and there's a chimpanzee. Lucy does 7 minutes of business. No, she doesn't. And if you watch the episode, it's almost funny because the director didn't work with her to make it better. The writer gave her nothing. Well, here are some props. Go have some fun. Well, that might work for Red Skelton or Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton or John Ritter, even perhaps. But Lucille Ball didn't just do stuff to do stuff. All of her comedy is motivated. And the best writers for her knew that you had to tie all the nonsense to reality in some fashion so that Lucille Ball, the person, the performer, the genius, could find the reality, believe in that reality. And because she believed it so much, all of us at home watching also believed. There was an episode where Lucy and Ricky and Fred and Ethel have to live in 1900. It's a bet between the men and the women. And Lucy and Ethel make bread. Now,
Yeah.
that all of the stuff they did leading up to putting it in the oven is funny, but it's all in the script. But Lucille Ball, and she demanded this of Vivian Vance and Bill Frawley and Desi, who were happy to go along with it. You believe it so much that when they open the oven door, out comes a loaf of bread 3 times as deep as the oven on a platform that's holding it up that's 3 times as deep as the oven. And nobody even questions that it's a cartoon. In reality, that could never happen. And then Vivian brings out this huge saw that just happens to be outside the kitchen door. It doesn't make sense. It's not real, but we perceived it as real because the two actresses completely believed what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's
that was
it's a very special talent.
oh, absolutely. Well, it says to the degree with which, she was not just a comedian, which I think more people credit her with being. She actually just was an amazing actress, right? Who knew how to be funny. And there's something to that because if you've ever seen even like Academy Award winning actors or actresses, and then they try to do comedy, and it doesn't always land, right? Like there's a gift to delivering a line or knowing how to
Yes.
pull the funny out of something,
That's talent.
right?
You can't I don't think anyone can really be taught how to be funny. I think people can be taught how to be funnier, but there
Agreed.
there is a rhythm. it's like you have a third eye or a second pair of ears listening to what's happening in this script, like what I just did, taking the right pause, knowing how long a laugh is gonna be, knowing, uh-oh, if I do something here, I'm going to kill the laugh or I'm going to kill the intent, even if it's funny.
Right.
Lucille Ball, Charles Nelson Riley once talked about being on an episode of Here's Lucy, and they were doing the read through around a table of the script, and Lucille stopped and said, "Great joke, wrong place."
Huh. Yeah, I like that.
That's someone who knew what she was doing. And when she had a great script and a good, strong director, Lucille Ball was better than anybody else who ever did sitcom work. And in her films, people don't remember Miss Ball did 70 films before I Love Lucy and a hit radio series that kind of spawned I Love Lucy, My Favorite Husband. And if I can give myself a plug, next year the new Lucy book is coming out, which is not just a redoing of the original book, but it's got a new forward by Fran Drescher. It already has a forward by Steve Allen, and I'm putting in all the movies and the radio shows and new interviews of people like Carol Burnett and Anne Margaret that I just, for whatever reason, couldn't get the first time around. So it'll be her whole career between two covers.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the only time I talk about her personal life is where it affects a particular performance.
Yeah.
The easiest one is the pilot of I Love Lucy. She's very pregnant with Lucy Arnaz. They don't in the pilot discuss her being pregnant, nor does she wear anything tight fitting. Everything is like very, very loose stuff because no one was going to watch it except the network and a possible sponsor. So I talk about that in the book that she is pregnant and what they had to do to make sure she didn't hurt herself.
Yeah.
But what was going on in their personal life that she became pregnant
Yeah.
is not gonna make vitamin
Relevant.
and vegemin any funnier than it
No.
already is.
Agreed. Agreed. I have to jump into some of your other stuff
Oh,
because
please.
I don't want to run out of time and not have gotten it to it. So let's talk a little bit about Ella Fitzgerald.
Well, I've written two books about Ella, and it started the same way. Not with an interview with Ella, but here is who I think, with all due respect to Mr. Sinatra and Miss Streisand and other people whose work I tremendously admire. I think Ella Fitzgerald was the greatest singer of popular music ever. Not
Well,
a
I mean,
not a
she's
word.
way up there for me. Do I consider her the best ever? I don't know. I mean, I have to put some thought into that, but she's definitely way up there.
And yet the only thing written about her personal life, her struggles, her climb, her trudge, was puffery and press agentry, and one to another they didn't match. The details would change, which led me to believe that, okay, no one's telling the truth here. This is Ella's being told to say stuff, or Ella has invented stuff to say because she was a tremendously private woman.
Yeah.
And I thought, this woman deserves a great book, a respectful book that tells the truth and tells why and how. Not sensationalizing it, but this is the truth. Uh,
What I liked also is that you touch upon her relationships with like Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe, Louis Armstrong, Tony Bennett. You take the time to intersect, her trajectory with these other legends, which I think adds something to it.
None of us who perform is completely unique. All of us who have talent are influenced by others. We're influenced by everything we see or read or hear or watch or attend. None of us works in a complete vacuum. Ella had people who influenced her, both creatively as a singer and as a career. And then you have to add in that she was a female and an African American female, which is in her lifetime very difficult to get ahead because you have white men running everything. And she persevered and she won handily, as a matter of fact. Uh, to understand her, to understand her music, you have to understand her circumstances. You don't just wake up at some age and you're a star.
No, I
It
mean,
starts from someplace.
yeah, I mean, arguably, you mean you kind of chronicle, her journey. This is a person who had, I'll say suffered, but I mean, she endured a lot of obstacles along the way. She didn't just wake up,
Oh,
the star that she is, but it probably is what made her music better, and her the person that she was, right? She's definitely a collection of her experiences. And you don't get to be that age or that person without having done a lot of living. Um, and I
Tony, there are a lot of people in the world, a lot of people who are very talented. I'd say 90% of them never do anything with it. Whether they're
I'd agree with
afraid,
that.
whether they're afraid of being different, afraid of failure, afraid of the competition, afraid of the hard work. There are people who need the structure of I do the same thing every day and I eat the same thing for lunch 3 times a week and that uber structure. Some people need that to be happy. That's not show business. Every day is different in show business. So a lot of people never realize even that they even have the talent. And if they do, they kind of ignore it. But the people who are born not just with the talent, but with burning ambition for one reason or another, Mr. Sinatra, Miss Streisand, Ella, and forgive me, I don't mean to equate myself that I'm as big a star as those people, but myself, I was thrown out at 15 and okay, show business. And I plunged in and I haven't looked back. But that takes a lot of moxie. And so it's not just being talented or being born good looking or being born anything. It's what do you do with it? The rest of it is God given or heaven sent or universally delivered, whatever you believe in. But the part all of us can take a bow for, what do we do with those circumstances? And I've fought. Maybe that's why I relate to these people so much. I have fought all my life. We could talk about my personal life next time I come on with you, but it's hard. It's difficult.
I also want to talk about your Emmy win.
You see it there sitting over there. Yes.
Right? Like I want to know what that's like. What is it like to just hear your name?
Um, with
What's
the
it like
Emmy,
to find out you're nominated, right? Are you Tom Cruise, you dancing across the floor in your underwear, or
not with the Emmy, which I will explain in a second, but with my Grammy nomination. That's what happened because I was this is the middle 90s and I happened to be living in Long Island at the time. I'd come back east for a few years and it's like 7 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning and I get this phone call. Hi, I'm so and so. And like, yes, yes. And someone I had known 10 or 15 years earlier. I wanted to be the first one to congratulate you. Now, my Ella book had already come out, but that's pretty much all I was known for at the time. What are you talking about? You've been nominated for a Grammy. and yada 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 yada. What? That I did a Snoopy dance around my office.
Sure.
The first box of books of my first book, I did that. See, I was a live performer. I was a nightclub and stage performer, a little bit of television and films, from the time I was 15 up through my middle 20s. And then unfortunately, or maybe fortunately as it's worked out, I had a battle with drugs and alcohol. And at 30, I got clean and sober. And knock on wood, still clean and sober all these years later. And I moved into writing books because I was concerned that the everyday rejection, you audition for things as a singer, as an actor, might make me drink or do drugs. So I thought, well, what can I do that doesn't get daily rejection? And I immediately, well, if I write a book, I won't get rejected until it's finished. So I went out and bought a computer and I started writing, and my first book sold almost immediately and was a huge hit. And it is why I get a phone call one day from a man who says, my name is so and so. You know that Ella and Decca Records have been suing each other for quite a while. I said, yes. Well, they've settled the lawsuit. So in the early 90s, there were no CDs of Ella's first 20 years of music. Nothing. He said, well, we're going to produce a big, huge 4 CD, big boxed set. And I called 10 people in the business and asked them who I should get to help me with this. And all 10 of them gave me your name and phone number. And
Wow.
I ended up choosing the songs, sequencing them, and then with my friend James Gavin, writing this 80-page booklet inside. And we got nominated for a Grammy for that. That was
Amazing.
amazing. You know, I don't take anything for being with you today is amazing. Anytime I get to perform, anytime I get to share stories, make someone happy, lighten their burden a little bit with my talent, I go, yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't take any of my career for granted. When I go into stores or banks or restaurants and I'm given special treatment, I never ask for it. If it's given, it's given because somebody else decided to give it to me. And I'm grateful, grateful, grateful. And sometimes a little embarrassed when they open up, cash registers just for me or, seat me ahead of other people who are waiting to sit down. But you know what? I'll take it. I've worked very hard. And I think that's how most grounded people in show business feel. The ones who throw their weight around, they're insecure. The ones who know who they are grateful. And I live out of a suitcase of gratitude.
Well, yeah, I mean, the truth of it is, I always say the entertainment industry is underrated in a lot of ways because, you find your audience, you meet your audience certainly where they are in life. And a lot of times people are going through things, right? Major things. And their little bit of escape or their joy or their way of just forgetting is to involve themselves in a TV show that's a favorite. Maybe they're binge watching, or maybe they go to see a show or a movie, or they go to Broadway, or they do something to try to lose themselves in whatever is happening. I say, like, I'm a cancer survivor, and there were
God
a
bless
lot
you.
of days where, I needed to just get absorbed in something else, whether it was a book that I was reading, or I would focus, if I was, uh, wherever I was, I would focus. If I was getting treatment on, I'm going to watch season 3 of Everybody Loves Raymond tonight. Like, I would just focus on that. And that's really a gift you're giving people, the ability to step out of whatever they're going through and have those moments of joy. So I think it's underrated in a lot of ways. Some of those things are things that even when we're a kid that stay with us forever, right? We remember our favorite shows or
You know,
the things.
I wrote and produced a documentary called Inside Television's Greatest I Love Lucy. And because I could, I used myself as a talking head on the show. And I said something then, and it's just as true now as it was then, specifically to I Love Lucy, but pick your favorite show. I Love Lucy is like comfort food.
Mm.
We're familiar with the plots. We know the characters. We've seen those characters in our homes so often that they feel like family. And we know that in 30 minutes, there's going to be a problem, there's going to be laughter, there's sometimes going to be music, and that the problems will be solved in those 30 minutes. Well, if one is struggling, and Toni, as you probably well know, since you've had your experience with struggling with your health, everybody is struggling
Yeah.
every day. There are, there's no one skating through anything. I've been in the homes of millionaires who sit and cry because of the problems they have.
Yeah.
I've been with people much more famous than I who are terribly unhappy about things in their lives. And I've been with people who, aren't in show business and work very, very hard to have a life for themselves and their families. So all of us, I would imagine, in show business have a mandate to relieve some of the tension for other people. Why else would the universe give us these talents to begin with? They weren't given to us so we could become rich. They were given to us to help other people. And that may sound very saccharine or very starry eyed, but when I'm in the company of great people, they feel the exact same way.
Yeah. So, Ella, let me take you
Yes.
back to Ella. So, you won the Emmy. Do you ever get the opportunity in your lifetime to talk to Ella?
Oh, sure. I worked with her towards the end of her career. One of the hallmarks of Ella's concerts, where we keep banning about these names, Tony Bennett, Barbara Streisand, Frank Sinatra. But most singers go on a tour now. They don't usually work every week like Ella did. They did a tour and they came home for a while. And they have these 11 songs are on this tour's set list. Ella never did that. Ella could do two shows a night and sing different songs. Ella had, and I'm not exaggerating, about 300 arrangements available to her for piano, bass, and drums, or for an orchestra if she had the orchestra. And she chose what she felt like singing that night. It all came from her talent and her heart. Well, as she got older, as her health really deteriorated, and memory, sometimes we get older and lyrics and things, but also arrangements and the ability to sing those very difficult arrangements. She was singing the same 10 songs over and over again. And I knew her management and I said, this is silly. So I would program knowing what song she'd like to open with, what she would use for a second song, what the first ballad should be. And I gave her set lists where I knew she could still sing those arrangements. And I would sometimes go to the shows with a friend and say, hey, she's going to sing this next. I say, you're crazy. And they go, how did you know that? That was a lot of fun for me. That was a lot of fun for me.
Oh my goodness, yeah. How many people ever get put in that opportunity really to, you know, to pre-program, if you will, the songs coming that are going to be sung by Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, just get the opportunity to meet her. Do you remember coming into contact with her the very first moment?
I
I
don't
ask
think
about the
I,
first moments a lot because I just think that those are so telling, right? Your first experience, your first like you starstruck. Like I like those
well,
first stories.
again, this may sound starry eyed, but my first meeting with her was in an audience. This is back in the 1970s. And I had standing room. to see Ella Fitzgerald at Carnegie Hall. And she sang whatever she sang that night. I was a huge fan of an album of hers called Ella in Berlin. That's where her version of Mac the Knife came from, and for which she won a Grammy. And I waited for just the right moment, and I shouted out at her, "Sing Mac the Knife." And she said, "You really want to hear that one again?" I said, "Yes." "All right, darling, just for you." And she said it. And then I said, "Now sing How High the Moon." She says, "Oh, you're greedy. You want two." "All right, darling, just for you." So when I was in her audience, I was there so often in the 70s and 80s and early 90s that she began to recognize me. And she was almost blind, but she recognized the sound of my voice and she'd greet me from the stage. That kind of sort of started it. Unlike Miss Ball, where I was meeting her in a public forum, Ella I met privately. And that was another case where like breathe, Geoffrey, breathe. It's not going to be okay. Breathe. Don't pass out. Um,
Yeah.
she was so shy. She was so not like a star, so concerned with her audience, so concerned that she did a good job that night. Uh, every show was new to her. Every show was an opportunity to make her fans happy, but every show was also an opportunity to not do her best. And when she didn't do her best, whether it was for health or the sound was wrong, the mic wasn't right, it upset her that the audience didn't get their money's worth. And I was, Ella, getting their money's worth from you. How could you not believe your audience got that from you? They loved you. There was like 6 standing ovations. That's who she was. The conceit wasn't there.
Yeah.
She was aware that her voice was a gift and it needed to be
Oh,
used.
it absolutely was. Yeah. I mean, what a body of work left behind. Again, talking creatively, uh, her life, I mean, it's definitely worth the read. Her life is quite the journey of experiences, um, really to make her who she becomes. But
She's
again,
the most recorded female singer outside of opera in history.
and I think she was the first person, not even female, but the first person to ever win 2 Grammys, right? At the same time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
From that album I just told you about, she won 2 Grammys.
Yeah.
And
So,
many more after that. She won a Grammy for the last album she made.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
released in 1990. She starts recording in 1935 and she's winning a Grammy in 1990. Still, it's
Yeah, it's
incredible.
amazing. I mean, this you get through, you even talk in your book about, her first appearances or appearances on like Ed Sullivan and
By the way, God bless you for reading the books. I appreciate that.
yeah, I'm a big reader. I love to read. So I never have anybody on the podcast unless I've actually read the book because I like to be able to talk about it. Um, you know, but I thought that it was kind of cool that you touched upon even her appearances on who's the other Diana Shore, I think.
Dinosaur, yeah.
Dinah Shore, yeah, maybe Carol Burnett too. Like all of these appearances that she did, um, which is, I'm going to use the word trivial to a certain extent, right? You think like, okay, well, that's what celebrities do, right? They make the rounds, right? They go around, they promote something, and they're forced to go on shows. But I thought it was a credit to the level of detail that you went into in covering what made her her, right? Like just covering something that in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem like much, but it was all part of her creative journey, wasn't it?
Yes, Ella and Miss Ball to a great extent, not as much. Every performance was something new. It wasn't cookie cutter. She didn't get blasé. Oh, Ed Sullivan, yawn, 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 yawn. No, she wanted to bring something new, something interesting, something of her to her audience every time she sang. And I will use another person I've written about, Ethel Merman. who pretty
Yeah, I wanted to
much
get to that book. I know we're running out of time, but you did
you
a
have as
great.
much time of mine as you want. Uh, but Ethel Merman, the last 20 years of her life was kind of on autopilot. It was the same songs and the same arrangements and the same gestures because she knew she could do these things really, really well. And she didn't have to learn new arrangements and learn new lyrics. And uh, Merman was more cookie cutter and less creative about what she brought to the stage. I'm not saying that Ethel was never creative. Of course, that's ridiculous. She couldn't have been the huge star that she was. You don't star in 15 hit Broadway musicals and introduce 40 or more songs that become standards
You're the
because you're
top,
not creative.
right?
Yeah, because she was
Cole
the
Porter
top.
to the top.
But Merman didn't really concern herself when she was on variety shows and when she sang things that were unfamiliar, it wasn't as good. So more often than not, she sang something from her concerts.
Right.
And it got old, even for a big fan like myself who adored her. Oh, that again. Can't we hear something different for a change? Each performer is different. Each performer looks at their career and what they do differently. I'd
Sure. I
never
mean,
taken
and with Merman, I mean, definitely touch upon just the fact that she's a tremendous Broadway star, which doesn't really mean much to often people in other parts of the country that maybe don't go to Broadway that often. But
it. Used to. It used to. A lot of hit songs came from Broadway.
yeah,
Usually, if someone was a big hit in a Broadway show, they ended up on radio, or later on they ended up on television, or they made a film where they brought that performance to the whole country. It's only really today where outside of New York City, people don't know what's on Broadway, who's on Broadway. Once upon a time, that was a big deal. And
I'd
getting
like to think,
someone,
it still is, and I'm sorry it's not because I adore Broadway. And yeah, I mean, I always say if you've never seen, and I've met people in my life who've never seen a Broadway show, and I say I mean, you don't know what you're missing, right?
I was
That's
fortunate. I was taken to my first Broadway show when I was 9.
yeah,
And living in New York City, pretty much from the late 60s to the late 80s, I saw every single thing that was on Broadway, usually for free, because I had connections. And
nice.
there's nothing like a Broadway, seeing a show with its original performers on stage with the original everything is a thrill. Even if the show isn't great, it's a thrill to watch all those myriad talents come together and put on a show, by gosh. Um, Today, to be in a Broadway show, you have to almost already be a star on television or film
Yeah.
because audiences won't spend hundreds of dollars to go see people they don't really know. When I was a kid, when you could see a Broadway show for 550 or 660. I don't mean 550, I mean $5.50 to see a show now costs
And
on.
there were Broadway stars that were exclusive to Broadway, and people knew of them years
And I've
ago.
been, and I've been lucky to know a lot of them. Ethel Merman, Mary Martin, Kay Ballard, Carol Lawrence, Carol Channing, who I adored. So many people who really, they did other things, but their fame and their fortune came from Broadway. And there is this understanding of the tremendous hard work it is to be in, especially a musical, 8 times a week. Ethel Merman used to say it's like taking the veil, which is the expression Catholics and Episcopalians use about being a nun. You take the veil, and everything else, you're just in that. To deliver all that hard work 6 days a week, twice on Saturdays, twice on Wednesdays, you can't do anything else except pretty much rest Vocalize, go to the theater, do your job, have a late dinner, come home and collapse, rinse and repeat.
Yeah,
Today it's different.
indeed. Right, but these truly are major people. And I like the concept that Lucy's an actress, right? Ella is a singer. Uh, Ethel Merman is a performer.
Singer comedian, I would say.
Yeah, but a performer of, I just, for some reason, I kind of categorize Broadway different. Like they're just a stage, like kind of a stage performer. They bring something completely different, I think, than the other two genres. Like the Ella is outperforming her music on stage, certainly similar, but not as a character, right? Like just out there doing her best music.
The word,
But
I think the word you're looking for, and I'll short story about me. A few years ago, I was asked by the Johnny Mercer Foundation to come and sing at a special thing they were doing honoring Johnny Mercer, who's my favorite lyricist. And I'll take a bow that I sang Satin Doll, and the man who runs the foundation is Johnny's grandson. And when I sing Satin Doll, I sing it the way it was written because the lyrics actually are gay. You know, I'm not for a girl catching me, switcheroony. And he said, you're the only one who's ever understood what that lyric was supposed to be, which is why the song doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And then he started clowning with me on stage. And after the show, I said to him, I was surprised you clowned with me because you didn't clown with anybody else. He said, yeah, they're singers. You're an entertainer.
an entertainer.
That's the word you're looking for. People
That's the
on
word.
Broadway or who were in vaudeville or burlesque were entertainers.
Yeah.
They,
So
they
that's kind of what I,
sang, yeah, they sang, they danced, they were funny, they could act, they could make you laugh, they could make you cry. An entertainer.
yeah. So to me, that's what Ethel Merman was more like
Yeah.
an entertainer, right? The Ella's just a golden voice, right? Just this beautiful voice. Her body of work just lives on. It'll probably always be singing 101, right? And Lucille Ball, well, actress, comedian. I mean, you really picked people. I liked that you picked women, by the way, too, which I thought was a credit to you. But you picked three women who rose to the top of their field in those genres,
I,
and
I didn't choose women
snapshots of them.
because they were women. I chose them because they were
They were the
women
best.
and no, they were the best at what they did, and no one was telling their stories.
I like that.
Ethel Merman's autobiography. I mean, it's a wonderful gimmick. Chapter 26, My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine. You turn the page, chapter 27. And she dined on that on talk shows and it sold books, but it doesn't tell the truth. If you want to know what happened, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Ethel Merman married Ernest Borgnine from McHale's Navy, and legally it lasted 28 days, but their actual marriage lasted 48 hours. And Merman kind of laughs it off in her book. I tell the real story. A story needs to be told to understand what happened to Merman afterwards. There was a series of unfortunate events, starting with her marriage to Borgnine, through her daughter dying of an overdose of drugs and alcohol, and then her parents, who were still alive, getting ill. That explains the career choices she made, why she gained weight, why her voice was not as good. I could say those things. Well, she gained weight, her voice was not as good. Well, those are facts. Why? Well, this explains why. And if you read the book or books like mine, where the author goes to the trouble of telling you why, you go, oh, I can relate to that. If I had to go through that, I might react the same way.
I could go on and on and on. I have to close the podcast. Um, because there's another one coming up after you. So yeah, a lot of times I record back to back on the same day.
Well,
I hope you
next time I'll come back and we'll talk about my being a witness to John Lennon's assassination.
Yeah, I mean, I have to have you back because I feel like there was so much I didn't cover.
Well, I talked a lot today. I'm sorry.
No. There was so many things. It's great to have a conversation with you. Your experiences, your life experiences are so enormous. So I'm going to say this was a part one.
All right.
Uh,
Why don't we say that and say let me say goodbye to your fans, and then so you have an ending to your podcast.
and I'm going to
Right.
say this was a part one, and it will absolutely be back with a part two. So stay
Well,
tuned.
it is a pleasure to be on with you and your fans and friends out there who are watching and listening. And I'll come on as often as you have me, Tony.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me. I'm going to close the podcast here and say he'll be back. Thank you.